Well, we're happy you're back, and over the next hour, a little bit before 2, we're starting now, and for the next hour, the Florida Council of Social Status of Black Men and Boys is sponsoring this portion of the program, and I want to personally thank that whole entire council, and where they're going to be introduced in a minute, for coming into Pinellas County and really sharing with our tremendous group and panel here that we have. I want to thank again publicly my colleagues, the superintendents, and certainly the Chancellor for being here today. And I'd like at this time to ask Chancellor Lyons to say a few words and introduce our moderator, Mr. Paul Wilson.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Grego. And thank you to everyone that's here today. I can tell you that I do not want to pretend as if I am a preacher. I have 2 brothers that are, and that's no shame in that. As a matter of fact, I'm very proud of them. But quite frankly, I want to make sure that I share with you that I'm grateful and thankful that you're here as the Chancellor, because the reality is that you're choosing to be here to make a difference in all students. And today's conversation is regarding our African-American males. So with that being said, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator today as we move the conversation toward solutions, but not shy away from the facts. So with that being said, our moderator, we're blessed to have Mr. Paul Wilson, who is currently serving as the Administrative Director at Miami-Dade County Schools. He is the Education Subcommittee Chair for this council, Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. And he is the great son of Congressman Frederica Wilson, I can't spit it out of my mouth, one of the founding members of this council. And last but not least, he has 17 years of educational experience. As Mr. Wilson comes forward, I'd like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to my colleagues and the superintendents that are represented here for this region. We are grateful to have them to serve as leaders in this region, and we're thankful that they're here today. Mr. Paul Wilson.
Thank you, Chancellor Lyons. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure for me to be here representing the Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys. More importantly, being here and sharing this space with you, because the fact that you're here says that this is an important topic to you as well. And I look forward to engaging in some meaningful conversation with these wonderful and brave individuals on the stage that have chosen to take time out of their busy schedules to travel here to join us for this conversation. But I would be remiss if I did not personally thank Chancellor Herschel Lyons for his tutelage, his guidance through planning this event and putting this event together. He ensured that I was able to communicate with everyone that I needed to. He stepped up, he showed out. So, sir, I salute you personally. I want to thank you for assisting me with putting this together, and on behalf of the Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys, we would like to thank you for your guidance and your tutelage for this event. Thank you, sir. Speaking of, I'd like to recognize really quickly before we get started the chair of the Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys, our fearless leader, Dr. Eddie Renier. And if Dr. Renier can stand along with the other members of the council that are here, please stand and be recognized. It is because of you we are able to engage in this type of conversation. It is because of you we are able to travel around the state and help districts out whenever they call on us. So I salute you, sir. Thank you very much. The Florida Council has been around for quite some time, and one of the individuals who was responsible for enacting the council is here with us in the audience. I'm sure he needs no introduction, specifically around this part of town and in this town. So without further ado, I'd like to bring to the stage for some brief remarks a gentleman that has dedicated his life to public service and ensuring that people in this particular region, as well as across the state of Florida, always had a voice, and that is none other than Secretary Frank Peterman. Come on up, sir.
It's quite an honor to be here today. I'm just glad that this particular dialogue is here in St. Petersburg. I see so many colleagues, so many friends of Sherwood on so many different levels. I want to thank a good friend and the chairman of this great council, Dr. Renier, and the rest of the council members. Very briefly, some years ago when myself and his mother, actually, Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, who was a state senator at the time, and I was in the Florida House, we put together this particular council. And so we're extremely ecstatic to see that this is still in operation and that great work is happening throughout this state. African-American males really need a lot of support in this state and throughout the nation. And we're so glad that it's here in this city, with the mayor here, Kreisman and others who are supporting, school board members who are supporting this great effort. So thank you so very much for being here, and let's go forward and change the lives of African-American males. God bless.
Thank you, Secretary Peterman. So at this time, I'd like to take a moment to introduce the members on the panel that will be engaging in this fantastic discussion, as well as the districts that they represent. First and foremost, we have Ms. Lori White, the superintendent from Sarasota County. Thank you for joining us. Next to Ms. White, we have Dr. Diane Green, who's representing Manatee County as the superintendent today. Should I skip the guy next to her? You know, representing the fantastic Pinellas County, we have Dr. Michael Grego, superintendent. Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting us into your backyard and being such a great host for this event today. I appreciate it. Next to him, once again, the fantastic Chancellor Herschel Lyons of Florida Department of Education. To his right, we have Superintendent Jeff Akins, representing Hillsborough County today. Next to him, we have Superintendent Jacqueline Bird from the wonderful Polk County. Thank you for joining us, ma'am. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Kurt Browning, Superintendent, Pasco County Schools. You know, it's one thing for them to be here today, but it's another when they were well aware of what we were going to talk about and how we were going to go about talking about it. I wanted everyone to know that we were going to have a very comfortable conversation about some very uncomfortable issues and topics. And not one of these individuals balked at that. Not one of them tried to provide any type of excuse for not being here, for not participating. In fact, it was quite the opposite. They welcomed this opportunity. They relished in the opportunity to be able to come here and talk about the many great things that are going on specifically in their respective districts, as well as regionally, in regards to trying to deal with some of these issues that we all are very, very familiar with. So that's what this conversation is about today. We're not going to spend a whole bunch of time lamenting the problems. I think we are well aware of what the problems are. I'd much rather spend this time and give these wonderful individuals a platform to talk about the solutions, to talk about what they're doing in their respective districts to mitigate some of these circumstances that we know that our African American males are dealing with, that they come to school with, the baggage that they carry, what are we doing to meet them where they are, and the like. So I want to recognize all of them as a whole right now for coming and participating in this conversation so that we can stop talking about it and continue doing something about it. So please join me, ladies and gentlemen, in thanking these individuals for being a part of it. Now, we're going to talk about a number of different issues today. We don't have a whole lot of time to do so, so we thought about what are 4 major themes or major topics that are posing problems not only within these 6 regions, but in all 67 counties across the state of Florida that we can use to start the conversation, because this is not the end don't be all of this type of dialogue. In fact, this is a springboard to more dialogue in the very near future, so that everyone around the state will have an opportunity to discuss and talk about these circumstances and what's being done to mitigate them. So we're going to start talking about academic engagement, specifically in the area of literacy, as we're talking about African American males. So what do we know? We know that African American males' attitudes toward literacy become increasingly more negative as the tasks and skills required become increasingly more complex, further driving a wedge between the African American students and their other counterparts. We also know that boys prefer reading texts with positive male characters as the main character, but unfortunately, the vast majority of children's literature used in elementary classrooms do not embody those types of themes. What else do we know? We know that boys are often less motivated to engage with text in the classroom than girls are. We know that boys tend to prefer reading for practical and informational purposes, while girls tend to read in ways that allow them to encourage the literary qualities of what they're reading, okay? A little deeper level thought. We know that young men are drawn toward newspapers and how-to manuals and things of that nature, short informational texts, when girls are drawn to more lengthy novels, stories, things along those lines. So what I want to talk about is what innovative practices are being implemented and geared toward the manner in which these particular students learn in each of your districts. And you can feel free to jump in, or I can pick on you, whichever you choose, but everyone will have an opportunity to respond. So, Ms. White, you want to start with you?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Certainly, engaging any student in the reading process is critical, and you really hit on some key points. What we have found successful through our intensive reading courses at the high school level is using a product called Achieve 3000 that is able to drive on kind of shorter topics, not the big novels, but of interest. And what is interesting is the student's readability is assessed, and the same article is then able to be shared with the students where they can really engage at their reading level. And then you have these rich conversations that kind of develop the vocabulary. So you can pick areas of interest such as athletics that really pulls students in. So that is one area that we're seeing more progress being made with many of our students, but certainly our male students that struggle with reading. The other thing we've done is try to make connections with the career technical education. The informational text, those practical types of skills that require certain levels of reading, but if it's done through a career technical, many times a technology-based type of skill development, they're much more readily willing to risk trying to decipher and trying to decode text in that kind of high interest area. So those are just a couple of things that we're trying.
Thank you. Ms. Berg?
Along with that, I would add, and we're utilizing both of those as well, But along with that, I will add, a lot of our students that are African American males, that we find out that they have a better approach to cooperative learning. When they're with their peers, they rather have the more oral conversation over the written conversation, where they can speak to their peers and they can feel more comfortable about the level of engagement that they're having back and forth with their peers on that. There's a more comfort level, it's a more safe environment for them as well, and they're able to ask those deeper questions, and they don't feel like if they ask the teacher, they're going to be put on the spot of, I don't know. So having that more cooperative learning environment where it's a peer-to-peer relationship and having that oral conversation, we find that works a lot better with our children. And also I would add, the teacher's expectation for not only just any child, but all children should be set at a very high level. And those children should know that it's safe. The level of expectation that's in the classroom is a high level of expectation. There's no right or wrong. It's how do we get there? How do we incorporate your answers to make sure that we're getting to the end point that we want to get towards for the literacy, and that you're able to take away some learning knowledge from that, whether it's from your peers or from peer groups or from the teacher.
Thank you. Dr. Green.
I'm going to take the perspective from the other end of the spectrum of catching them when they are very young. We recently implemented Title I pre-K classrooms in our district. So for our students of poverty, they can have a full day of pre-K with a certified teacher and a paraprofessional in that classroom. We also are Lori and I are also part of the grade level reading initiative, and our partners, United Way, works with us in providing male tutors for our pre-K students, not just African American males, but male pre-Kers. And so we use a product called Footsteps to Brilliance. It engages them in technology. The tutor works with them in ebooks. Students, they are allowed to choose from many genres. So our male students like books on animals, and it also has music. And so that one-on-one connection with that male tutor has definitely made a major difference in our African American male students learning the importance of reading very early and enjoying reading very early. It's also, like Jackie said, they're in a safe environment. They're just with that one person, and they get that connection, and they're more open to share. I'm amazed that my reading pals will tell me all the time, oh, did you know this, or did you know that? They are looking for that male role model to work with them. And so one of the things we have been pushing is to find more retired male, it doesn't matter their ethnicity, to come in and tutor our pre-K male students.
Sounds great. Dr. Grego, what's happening here in Pinellas County?
Well, let me maybe build on something so we're not repeating many of the things we use Achieve 3000 in the mentorship program. You know, it's funny that Coach Dungy, of all the topics that he was going to talk about, he talked about literacy in the male with young boys, because the things that you talk about, Paul, are real. One of the things, hitting it from a different angle, was that we are working with our educational foundation at Stetson University to take a look at those strategies that are better geared towards young boys. I mean, some might say that girls play school a little bit better than boys do. And so the majority of our teachers across this table are female. And so what strategies might be used and taught to our teachers that might better engage our young boys, African American and others, in the reading process specifically, the knowledge about the non-fictional texts and what's interesting to them, filling our media centers with asking the students, so what are you interested in, and perhaps purchasing those as we are. So we're taking a few pilots, I think 12 or 14 elementary schools, and these teachers are going through the training of perhaps strategies that are more engaging. As was said before, young African American males enjoy that relationship and engagement, the collaborative learning, and we need to continue, we as school districts need to continue to reach out to our universities to find better methods of teaching young boys.
Anyone else want to add anything?
I'll kind of build on a little bit what Mike said, because a lot of the things that some of the other superintendents have talked about in Hillsborough County in our classrooms, making sure we have culturally relevant text, engaging text in our classrooms, that's important. But we took a little different approach in Hillsborough County. We asked the question, what if any student in Hillsborough County could access engaging reading material 24 hours, 7 days a week? What would that look like? So we've partnered with many local agencies in Hillsborough County, and also My On Reader is a huge partner in our district, to offer digital text to all of our families in every home. And we've partnered with the Tampa Housing Authority they've placed in every one of the housing units internet access so that students can access very engaging text on their level with their interests. It's at every Boys and Girls Club, it's at every Y, it's everywhere our kids go. They're blanketed with engaging text. And what that also does is when they're at those places, they're with adults that are motivating them and building relationships and encouraging them in that effort to read. So when we know we have students across our region that can access engaging text 24 hours, 7 days a week, every day of the year, we know ultimately that's going to increase literacy.
Just real quickly, the whole literacy piece is one that's troubled me ever since I became superintendent. I've told students over and over again, if you can't read and you read well, you're going to have a difficult time doing anything in life. And that cuts across gender, race, socioeconomic. I mean, it's true with everybody. What we're actually finding in Pasco, sadly to say, is the achievement level of our African American students are actually slightly decreasing. And this is very troubling to us. And we're going to talk about discipline in just a little bit, but that's a huge issue. Not just with that, but how we as a district are approaching that, and what some of the trends that we found that need to be addressed. I agree with Superintendent Green. I'm concerned not only when our kids get into school, well, if they're fortunate enough to hit a high school, but as they get into kindergarten, and their ability and where they are reading-wise, and the ability to be able just to know their alphabet. Count to 10, much less 100. Know their primary colors, the seasons of the year. Those are basic things that our teachers are faced with every day. One of the things that we found is working very well for us is the Teen Trendsetters program that was funded through the Barbara Bush Foundation. We have 12 schools that we've in our third year with that, and it's good and this is where high school, middle school, and high school students will mentor elementary schools at some of the most struggling elementary schools, reading to them weekly, giving them libraries to read with, and we've seen a significant increase in those populations for their literacy skills. Finally, the thing that we've done is every summer, typically there's a summer slide, and our district has taken on we've retrofitted a bus or two, and we actually take it into neighborhoods, lower income, poverty neighborhoods, and we feed kids, first and foremost. And then secondly, I had an assistant superintendent who's since left and retired, but he came up with this crazy idea that we looked at him cross-eyed, and he says, well, why don't we take that other bus we have out there and fill it with books, and it can follow the feeding bus. And I'm telling you, these kids are turned on when they can go to this bus, they can eat, and then they can build a library. And we encourage them to come and get the books and read through the summer. I will say, and you'll hear me say now, and you'll hear me say several more times this afternoon, it goes back to having, being read to, and having exposure to books and literacy at a very, very early age. If we could do that, if I could change one thing, it's having kids come into our system that have been read to, that are prepared to learn in kindergarten. We're trying to find the magic formula, as are all superintendents.
Thank you. Superintendent Byrd, you talked about something, you hit on something very briefly that serves as a fantastic segue to student readiness and a conversation about it. You talked about teacher expectations and ensuring that teachers don't necessarily base their expectations on race, creed, gender, color, zip code, socioeconomic status, and the like, right? So let's talk a little bit about student readiness, and this is a twofold kind of conversation. We're going to talk about student readiness in regards to universal pre-K in early literacy, readiness coming into kindergarten, and then we'll shift a little bit, and you can shift in your comments and talk about both in your comments, but we also want to talk about college and career readiness for your high school students and what's being done to ensure that that's happening. So what do we know? We know that beginning kindergartners, African American males typically start behind their counterparts in terms of emergent reading and math skills. We know that on average, African American 3 to 4-year-olds score in the 20th percentile on standardized tests. We also know that among African American males, only 18% show competence at sound recognition at the start of kindergarten and 36% at the end. More frighteningly, research shows that 1% of African American boys show evidence of sight reading at the start of kindergarten, and only 7% by the end of kindergarten, as opposed to their white counterparts who show 3% at the start and 17% at the end of kindergarten. And the same ethnic differences can be seen in regards to mathematics, where African American boys show 1% proficiency in addition and subtraction at the start of kindergarten and 8% at the end, where their white counterparts show a 5% proficiency at the start and 22% at the end. What else do we know? We know that by the end of 2020, 2/3 of all jobs will require college experience, with 30% requiring at least a bachelor's degree. We also know that only about 57% of African American students attend schools where they have the full complement of courses necessary to be college ready. So with that said, what deliberate practice or efforts are being made to increase, number one, the enrollment in students in those types of courses, AP, Advanced, IB, Cambridge, honors courses, dual enrollment, industry certification courses from the high school perspective, as well as what's being done in your pre-K programs. And you guys talked about it briefly during the last segment, but you can delve a little deeper into it in this segment.
How long is the program?
Pre-K through adult.
Well, that's what we're talking pre-K 16. I mean, this is, and I'm sure Chancellor Lyons will agree, we are talking pre-K 20.
And thank you for queuing me up. I know you asked for Superintendent Byrd to speak on this, but quite frankly, as Diana said, and you notice we use first names because we are colleagues, we work together for the same cause, and just as you do as mentors and supporters of education, for education. But quite frankly, we do not want to be here 5 years from now having the same conversation. And the only way that we can ensure that is that we start at pre-K. Because we've been having this conversation about the achievement gap for years. So let's start now, ensuring that all students have access to pre-K programs. Yes, the state of Florida has made that open, but it's not for the entire day. It's only part of the day, and it's based on income. So when we talk about student readiness, it's important that we have teachers prepared to teach students literacy from kindergarten on. I'm blessed to be here in my 7th day, to have a new grandson born 7 days ago, and I have a 5-year-old granddaughter living in the state. I want to ensure that not only them, but all students have access to a high-quality education. It starts with the teacher. It starts with the school leader. And so here at the Department of Education, I want to take this opportunity to introduce our Chancellor for Career and Adult Education, Chancellor Duckworth. He's also serving as the Vice Chair of the Council. And when we talk about career and adult readiness, we're talking about college and career, correct? So moving from pre-K to high school, I wanted you to hear this from the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. And what they've clearly stated is African Americans who earn bachelor's degrees in STEM, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics, majors can earn as much as 50% more than African Americans who major in programs, and this is nothing wrong with these programs, major in programs such as art, social work, psychology, and all of that according to researchers. So college and career ready starting at pre-K, and the department, State Board has made it clear that they expect us to develop courses for coding at elementary level, and we are doing that. We expected to have a course description prepared by the second semester of this year. So those are the things that we have in place at the state level that these superintendents are very aggressive about and already in the process of doing it locally. So with that, I'll turn it over to anyone else who would like to share.
I'll be a little bit
Go ahead, sir.
bold in terms of the VPK, a voluntary pre-K. First of all, we have to partner very closely with the Head Start, Early Head Start, that 1 through 4 is critical, and the quality education and the quality instructors during those periods of time. But the other thing is that we as a state, as a community, need to rally around for the appropriate funding of VPK programs all day long, not 3 hours a day in the fall and the spring. And because it provides then the resource for everyone to start kindergarten ready. In Pinellas County, we have VPK programs in every school that we have room, and I know my colleagues do the same thing. We also have, as was talked about before, that summer slide. So as students, especially African American students, if they're falling behind, we have to catch them. We have that responsibility. We established a summer bridge program 3 years ago with about 6,000 students. Now we have over 16,000. By the way, we have double the number of African American students, especially male students, attending there. And we focus on 3 fun things: reading, science, and applications of science and mathematics. So we have to rally around what those best practices are and say, let's get behind all districts in terms of having fully certified teachers and supporting those fully certified teachers in VPK programs, because the funding is not there and it needs to be there if we really want to make a difference, especially amongst some of our most impoverished communities. At that point, then we need to continue to fund our summer programs, because what we're doing here, the bottom line is, when we're trying to close an achievement gap, we're trying to get a greater than a year's worth of learning in a year's worth of time. And we need more time. We need the summer, not 180 days, but like other developing nations, it's 210 or 215 or 220 days. And so for many of our students, they need that extra time. I believe it's if we're going to continue, or if we're going to end this type of conversation, we've got to change the formula in the educational structure by placing highly qualified teachers in front of these young babies, 3 or 4 years old, and also engage them to a greater period of time than 180 days.
I'd like to share, we also we are very big into partnerships with other organizations. Moving beyond pre-K, which for us, we felt we couldn't wait, so we've invested our Title I funds for those students. They have full pre-K all day, free of charge for them. And we partnered with agencies such as the South Florida Museum, and one of our classrooms is inside that museum. Those children see Snooty, the oldest manatee in the state of, well, I guess the oldest manatee. They see that every single day. They see this gigantic dinosaur bones every single day. Imagine what that does for a child of poverty who does not have connections, or who does not have a family that can take them to the museum or could take them to the public library, which the public library is right across the street, so they have access to our public library. But we also partner with a consortium called EEC, and that consortium, and Ms. Barbara Harvey, who is the head of that consortium, is here today. We partner with them. She works with students in a certain geographic area, the African American students. They provide tutoring. They connect with the high schools that those students attend, of what's happening there. And during the summer, through collaboration, we pay those students to work in our school district, or we work with other businesses to get them jobs. So during the year, they must maintain at least a C or above average. They must be engaged in higher rigorous courses, as high as that they are able to obtain. And then during the summer, they continue with the tutoring. So they work in the morning, and then in the afternoon, they go to class. And they are being taught by certified teachers. They are also, paraprofessionals are there that are college students, and the reason why I know they're college students, my son taught some of those students. And the amazing thing was that they saw what their future could be. They're being tutored by a student who attends High Point University on a baseball scholarship, and they're thinking, you look just like me, I can do what you're doing. And so by doing that partnership, these students, Ms. Harvey provides me their grades, she provides me their test scores. They're 100%, aren't we at 100% graduation rate at this time? Yes. 100% of those students graduate. We're serving over close to 100 students right now. For them to be able to work during the summer, they are required to go through the tutoring program throughout the school year, or they're not allowed to work. We have partnered with businesses such as Taco Bell, which hire students from Ms. Harvey's program, other beauty salons, other businesses that have come on board with us. However, the school district is the largest partner, and she's always asking for more money. But we realize the benefit that if you could guarantee that I can bring students who traditionally are not graduating and put them through this program, and we're guaranteeing 100% graduation rate, it's worth the dollars that we are investing in it. So that is one program that I think is indeed needs to be replicated with support with the school district and other community partners.
That sounds amazing, especially on both ends of the spectrum, what's being done for kindergarten readiness as well as college and career readiness in each of your respective districts. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about something that I believe Superintendent Akins briefly touched upon, and Superintendent Browning actually, is the discipline disparity, okay? And along those same lines, when we're talking about discipline disparity, I want to talk about cultural competency. And I know that that's something that is becoming increasingly popular once again, because nothing is new in education, right? So it's becoming increasingly popular once again in regards to school districts looking at various professional development activities for their teachers to have a better and deeper conceptual understanding of what some of these kids are coming to school dealing with, some of these circumstances that they're coming from and dealing with, and how they impact learning and how they impact student achievement. But so what do we know in regards to discipline disparities? Well, we know that there are more than 1/3 of the students who are suspended for 10 or more days typically go on to be confined to a correctional facility. Notably, we know that although alternative placements in alternative schools and things along those lines are often viewed as a disciplinary solution, some research shows that it further exacerbates these negative outcomes, especially for young men of color. We know that based on a longitudinal study of students in the state of Florida, found that 39% of African American male students were suspended, compared to 22% white and 26% Hispanics. And that same study also showed that those African American male students were suspended for longer periods of time than their counterparts. So we know that the U.S. Department of Education reported in the year 2014 that all out-of-school suspensions of school-age children, 42% of them were given to black males. Okay, so this is what we know, right? We know that this discipline disparity oftentimes leads to an overrepresentation of African American males in ESE programs, right? Specifically EH programs, right? Because their behaviors are often misconstrued and misunderstood by the teachers that are serving them. So my question to you all are what are some ways that your respective districts are addressing the disproportionate number of African American males suspended and expelled? And what kind of practices and solutions are being done within your districts? And Chancellor Lyons, you can chime in from a state level as well to ensure that this level of sensitivity is present in regards to the extenuating circumstances that these kids are carrying.
We looked at our data a couple of years ago and were very disturbed. It was frankly data that I was ashamed of. And so we made a focused effort to change that data. And we implemented restorative practices, K-12, which is not just a set of procedures, it is a cultural shift.
It sure is.
In terms of not thinking in terms of consequences as disciplinary action, but the learning opportunities and how we restore each other in that process. It has shifted the paradigm totally. We look at alternatives to suspension before we suspend, but we also connected with the juvenile justice system in the courts. We are there every Wednesday when that court proceedings. We are next to the judge as a partner in determining how can we work together with this family to get this student on the right road to success. And there's amazing communication. We look together in terms of consequences within the juvenile justice system. So it's not anything a school district can do on their own, but a school district can take a leadership role in changing the culture of how we view it. We had 0 expulsions last year, and our suspensions have decreased to an incredible level. So we're proud of the results, but what I'm proud of most is that I'm proud that our teachers are going to be able to accepting the fact that the goal is not to get this kid out of my class, but what can we do differently to help that kid be successful in that class?
Wonderful. Superintendent Browning?
You know, Paul, you can't teach kids if they're not in school. And we too, just like Sarasota, we, of course, the Tampa Bay Times, when they start running their articles about what's going on in Hillsborough and Pinellas, I take notice. And so I look like a hero because I'm going to be proactive in this. But I learned from my colleagues to the South. But we looked at that, we started looking at that data, and it's like lifting the lid on a pot, and you're really not sure what's in there. And we kind of knew what was in there, but I don't think any of us really wanted to own what was in there. And so I took it upon myself, just told staff, I said, we need to look at the data because do we know what the data looks like? Well, it looked the same way as Hillsborough and Pinellas, and I'm sure surrounding counties, and that is that we were disciplining African-American students at a higher rate than we were white students. And then we had to ask ourselves, and of course, we had to figure out what are we going to do about it. And we have a saying in Pasco, you know, we own it. If it's a problem, we own it. It's all of our issues. So what we ended up having to do is, you know, that discipline is usually generated at the school level. So we have really instituted a plan to train our teachers and train our administrators on behavioral supports, how discipline. We came up with a discipline matrix. We had discipline all across the board in Pasco. And I mean all across the board, depending on what elementary school, what middle school, what high school you attended. And now we have a matrix that kind of tightens that up. But we're also looking at what we're doing in lieu of suspension. Like I said, you can't teach kids when you suspend them. All you're doing is compounding the problem. And so what we're looking at, and it takes money, it takes time to look at these alternative programs. But we're very concerned about it, and we are looking at training our teachers, having them look at the data themselves. The data doesn't lie, and then we hold them accountable at the school saying, what are you doing about this disproportionate data? I still say, and I'm still Pollyanna in all this, but I still say it goes back to relationships, relationships, relationships. It goes back to relationships that teachers and administrators have with those kids. And when they understand that regardless of the color of your skin, it is a teacher or an administrator that has cared about me as a student and has encouraged me, has disciplined me when I need to be disciplined. But that's part of the whole relationship thing. And I think kids will produce and kids will behave in most circumstances when they're treated with respect. But we're really going through an intensive effort in Pasco about training our teachers and our administrators on what discipline looks like.
Superintendent Akins, what's going on in Hillsborough?
Thank you. Well, amen to the relationships part, Kurt, because relationships are the key to everything. But when I came in superintendent a year ago, one of the things that I saw with our disproportionate data, we were suspending our African American students over 3 times the rate of their white counterparts, and that's unacceptable. The loss of instructional time was incredible, and the students were never going to be able to overcome that. So a couple of things we had to do to look at this systemically across a large district. Number one, you have to define really what does advocating for students really mean? What does that look like? What behaviors does every adult in the system have to have in order to truly advocate in the best interest of kids, all kids? Number two, and this is the irony of it all, we have to talk to kids. You have to talk to the students. You have to listen to them. They will tell you real quick why they're choosing to behave the way that they're going to behave. And if you listen to them long enough, the answer's done. You don't even have to talk to any adults because you can pretty well take your plan from that. Number one, engaging classrooms. I need to be in a classroom that someone cares about me, but number two, what I'm learning in there is going to be applicable to my life. What does that look like in a classroom in Hillsborough County? That's what we have to really redefine in our classrooms. I know one of the things we're doing in Hillsborough County is we're very close to achieving exemplary status in the teaching of African American history for across our entire district, K-12, so that every single student in our district really understands their culture, their history, their lineage, and in talking to several of our African American leaders, that's a disconnect for some of our African American males. If you think about every other student or family that comes to this country, many of them will bring their culture and their heritage right with them, and they will be able to express it in their daily life. But for our African American males and females, there's some psychological disconnect about their lineage, that they have to know that there's great leadership in their lineage. There's great overcoming in their lineage. And many of our students, as I talk to our African American leaders, that they have this disconnect. So we have to infuse that into the classrooms along with engaging classroom work. And the other thing, and this all relates to discipline, because when you have a connected student to their culture, to their classroom with a caring adult, the choices they make will change. They will change, and just like Coach Dungy said, ultimately you can blame everything else if you want to, but ultimately you have a choice to make. What we want to do is set the conditions in Hillsborough County for our students to always want to make that great choice, whether it's in a classroom, on a bus, out in their community. And so that takes everyone working together to do that, and that's what we're on a mission to do. But it started with listening with our kids. And I want to applaud Alliance for Public Schools. I know they're out there. They were a huge partner in Hillsborough. I know they're here in Pinellas County as well, and other counties across the state. They started that conversation with our students. The schools that really we have opened up and had dialogue with our students, graduation rates have soared, suspension rates have decreased. Student-to-student mentoring programs have increased all across our district, which just changed the trajectory for our students.
Thank you. Superintendent Byrd.
A lot of times, people think relationships are not important, but they are important. When you have a relationship, children understand what you're asking of them at that point, and they're willing to do what they need to do to get to a successful end. So when you're looking at discipline, sometimes you don't know what's happened in that child's life when they entered that classroom. You don't know what has occurred. You don't know that they eat the night before. You don't know what happened with a family member. But those relationships, if you have those relationships, you will have that information, and you're able to capitalize on that and help move that student beyond the discipline part and beyond the productive side. But it also goes back to the engagement in the classroom with the teacher. The teacher has to understand, how do I engage this child into, instruction? How do I make the level of engagement go up to where if they're bored, if they're acting out, if I know what's going on, I can engage them into instruction and curriculum to move them forward. So how does that level of engagement happen within there? We too peeled back the data and we looked at the numbers and noticed our numbers were very high. We also started to look like, what was it happening and where was it happening? Was it happening in the classroom? Was it happening outside the classroom? Where was it taking place? And I'll tell you, many times we often found out we had our SROs, or you may call them SRDs, that filled in a gap as that discipline, to handle the discipline side. That's not their role. They're the law enforcement. They're not a disciplinarian in a classroom. So then we went back and we had to retrain our teachers, our administrators, and the champs. We wanted a proactive prevention assessment done first, and we wanted something to be productive. Because if they're not in school, they cannot learn. If they're not in school, your graduation rates will not go up. If they're not in school, then you'll have more retentions. So therefore, we had to go back. What do we need to do to be proactive and have a positive approach to making sure that we're not just disciplining behaviors because a child is acting out? That might be the way they express themselves during that lesson. That might be the way that that child only knows how to get across. But you have to be positive and proactive in that approach. We started with our elementary, middle school, and it's going to our high, implementing champs district-wide this year, where it is a positive and proactive approach. Our expulsions are down, our suspensions are down. But it's going to take not doing it just once, but you have to do it consistently across the district. And for everybody to know, it's about keeping our children in school, and it's about making sure we engage them into the classroom and putting programs there that will engage them, such as STEM, which we're infusing in a lot of our classrooms.
You're right. It's indeed both a climate change as well as a cultural change, and we know as educators that, especially in the realm of education, cultural changes do not happen overnight. It's a systematic approach, and it's chipping away until the thought process is shifted and changed. So I appreciate that, and Superintendent Browning, I heard you say that the mantra in Pasco County was "We own it," and I think all 5 of your other counterparts just prove that they own it as well, and that's exactly what this platform was about, to talk about these things, because I think you probably don't really get an opportunity to talk about the many great things that you're doing, so that your community stakeholders can get a good understanding of what it is you're doing. So I appreciate the candor up here this afternoon. So and it's a perfect segue, actually, the whole discipline disparity to the next and the final topic that we're going to discuss, and that's we're going to talk a little bit about family and community engagement. I mean, we were here this morning with a wonderful community engagement event featuring Coach Tony Dungy and Dads Take Your Child to School Day. I'm sorry, Tristan and Trent, Daddy's up here, so I couldn't take you guys to school today, but I guess I'll get an excused absence from Chancellor Lyons on that tip. But I do want to talk a little bit about how we engage or re-engage parents to our schools to support, and our districts to support student learning. So what do we know? We know that based on a national study of parents that was sponsored by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation last year, we know that only 42% of parents at low-performing schools felt as though they were as involved as they should be. We know that some of the other barriers that they talked about was that the parents felt that teachers waited too long to tell them about a problem, or that the only interaction that they had with said parent was when it was a problem, or bad news, or something negative. We know that there is a high level of tension or surrounding the relationships between parents and teachers. We know that there is a strong sense of misconception from teachers in regards to the parent's ability to their own educational ability or their ability to respond to whatever inquiries that the teacher may have and meeting that parent where they are. So what I want to spend our last few minutes together talking about, and then hopefully this is something more along a positive line, because this is a positive type of conversation and topic. What tools and resources are shared with parents to support children learning at home, first and foremost? I know you guys, I've done my research, so I know that in each of your respective districts, you have some innovative things going on in regards to family and community engagement. So I want you to talk about these efforts that are being utilized to garner this community support, be it for your mentoring programs, your apprenticeship programs, through service learning projects and other community leadership opportunities. What are some of the things that you're doing? And I'll start with you, Chancellor Lyons, so that we can talk from a state perspective first.
Thank you very much. I do not want to take it away from the superintendents here, because you need to hear regionally what's happening. But I would be remiss if I didn't take the opportunity to make sure that everyone knows that the commissioner is exceptionally focused on this piece. And she leads with that because of her own life. But I also would like to acknowledge real quickly our Bureau Chief for Family and Community Engagement. I want to use that word engagement for a second, because once upon a time it was family and community involvement.
Big difference.
Night and day difference. Angelia Rivers, would you please stand right over here to the left? She's our Bureau Chief at the Department of Education, so thank you so much. Strong leaders. So with that being said, I'll let the superintendents share.
Thank you, Chancellor.
What they do in their places.
I'll start. I agree with Chancellor Lyons. There's a big difference between involvement and engagement. And for many of our families, especially of poverty, the amount of time that they have available to be involved is so limited that we have taken the stance, no, I simply need you to be engaged. And engaged does not mean you have to be at the school. So through our federal dollars, we invested in 2 positions. One is our graduation enhancement technician and our behavior tech. At the school level, in those schools, we have a person whose whole job is to connect with families that may be disconnected from the school. Many times these students have chronic absenteeism, they may have behavior issues, but the key to the position is we hire people that we know that those families can connect with. And so most of our GETs and behavior techs are African American males. And when that male can connect with that family, they seem to have that relationship and that understanding. And so we implement what we call check and connect. They check in with those students every day for only 3 minutes. How's your day going? Did you have breakfast? Did you have dinner last night? Is there a problem? If we find out there's an issue, their whole job is to go now get the social worker or someone else to problem solve. How do we help fix that issue? And for many of our students, we connected them to dental health. So we connected with our rural health services and brought the dental van to every single one of our Title I schools. And at night, we also invited their families to come get because we found that was an issue why those students may not be coming. Or we connected them to other services. We got all of our doctors that would serve most of those communities to change the students' appointments to the afternoon so that we would ensure that they would not miss any school time for a doctor's appointment. So our approach has been to engage them, to let them know there's someone here who can maybe be the stand-in for you, because many parents may not have graduated high school, so now they have a fear of school. But they do want to help their child. So this person connects and helps them engage with their parent. The second thing, and this isn't about me, I make it my priority to connect with our faith-based organizations across our district. I make it my priority to connect with leadership out in the community. So when an issue arises, they trust me enough to come to me and say, this is a problem. And I have the ability to come in and say, let's figure out how to solve this. Many times, that child may have done exactly what that issue arise, but I'm allowed to work with that community to ensure that we can resolve the issue, not allow it to explode into something that we don't want to happen, but also provide services. And one of the services that has become very strong in our school system is a program called SABLE. It is dealing with mental health issues. We connect, though, if we have a student that has that as an issue, we pull them out of their school for however long it takes and provide mental health services for that student, as well as providing their education. And a lot of that comes with the partnerships from our agencies out in our community. We have a certified psychologist who is totally dedicated to serving those students. And we are continuing to get, they're not repeaters. Once they come and we feel like everything has, we've helped them find those strategies to help them be successful. Their parents, we also work with the family. We help those parents with strategies in communication. Very few of the students come back. And so we have built for Manatee, and maybe the reason we're doing many of this is because Lori said her data was shameful. We're number 2 in the state. So that's not a ranking I particularly care about. Number 2 for African American males in ESE for Manatee. And so when I came, it was my mission to say, we're gonna own this, but we've gotta put things in place that we can engage those families and engage our school district with the community to help support them and moving that process along. So we're nowhere where we want to be, but we now have a flow chart that we can match services for each and every student and what's going to help them be successful and their families.
That's what owning it is all about, man. Thank you very much. Superintendent Grego, what's going on here in Pinellas County in regards to family and community engagement, sir?
This is one of those areas that we tried to grab kind of the bull by the horns, and I don't know if Dr. Brim is still here. She helped organize this, and since we're highlighting certain people, if she's here, stand up and say thank you. It's her sole job in really that engagement. We have community liaison positions at each school that are a tremendous asset to connect the mentors with the students, and without that connection, as those of you who run schools know, that if it's nobody's job, or if it's everyone's job, it's nobody's job. So that support that our board is giving to our individual schools with that community liaison position, our mentoring programs, and many, many programs that we've already announced today. But in addition to that, I think it's critical, as I think Jeff said before, we expand that learning time and we contract or connect, involve, engage the community and the parents with the learning environment. And we've issued out over 6,000 laptop computers. We bring parents in, we partner with them, we provide software. Our friends at Bright House provide internet connectivity at a very, very reduced price or free. And on there are the same exact software products and experiences that they reach in the school, so it's an expansion of the school day, but we're partnering with the parents. In addition to that, we really have embraced this concept of engagement. We've worked heavily with Dr. Karen Mapp from Harvard University. I mean, this is her passion and her life study. She's been with us for 3 years, and I can say I am seeing a difference in the way our schools are relating to the parents. And let me give you 3 major things that we gauge our involvement or engagement with. The first thing is that whatever we are asking the parent for that engagement, it's about their child. So I now see schools that are not just doing a math night, but they're doing a math night about their child. And they can expect that when they go to that school or wherever the connection is, it's about the learning and academic progress of their student. And that is critical. Parents love their kids. They want to know about the progress that their students are making. And we ought to inform them at every single visit. The second thing we want to do is if we invite them in or wherever the location is, to inform them about the content or inform them about the level of expectation of their students. What's being expected. And the third thing, which perhaps is the most important, is to ensure that when they leave, they have a means of assisting their student at home. And you need to provide that means. It might be something in an elementary school as simple as flashcards or something to learn multiplication tables, but that you have to involve them in that learning process. Those three things are happening as we use that as a litmus test in terms of the progress and the involvement and engagement. In addition to, thank you, Melissa, for being here and all you do at the parent universities. We started parent universities, as Jeff has, a year or two ago, and it is mushrooming. I would encourage all my colleagues throughout the state to really, truly begin to develop programs centered around parents and their needs, like a conference. First one started maybe a little bit discouraging, only 100 or less than 100, and the second one was a few hundred, and the next one was even greater, so stick with it. Parents want to be involved. They just need to feel comfortable about that. And let's face it, the most common word spoken today is what? Relationships. And so what's so important is that as we're training all of our administrators in restorative practices, it's about the heart and soul of that is really about relationships and cultural sensitivity.
Just trying to steal my job.
That's my cue, and I'll end it there. So.
Well, what a wonderful way to wrap up our conversation on family and community engagement. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that everything that you all talked about from that regard is extremely important, because we all know that relationships are paramount, and I don't think there's a relationship that's more important than the parent and school relationship, and that pipeline being a two-way street of communication, being not just a vessel of bad news, but also a vessel of positivity, and be the first person to tell me when he's doing something right, too. Just as you're the first to tell me when he's doing something wrong. I tell you, I don't think there's a tougher job in the world than being superintendent of schools, regardless of the size of your district, regardless of anything else dealing with it. So you individuals on stage are the real MVPs to me, because you have such a difficult job to do. You are in charge of things that you don't totally control. You are graded on circumstances that you can't control, and you do it with a smile on your face every step of the way, which I think is probably the most impressive, is that you're able to navigate through the red tape and the bureaucracy and the nonsense, for lack of a better term, that's often placed in front of you, and still keeping the true essence of why you got into the business in the first place at the forefront of your decision making, and that's in the best interest of students. So I don't think everyone understands that. I work for one of your colleagues, Superintendent Alberto Carvalho down in Miami, who is like a machine who never stops, right? And you all know that. So I watch him do it, and I'm always looking like, how do you do it? So I gotta salute all of you, because you have one of the most difficult jobs. And from what I can gather from the time that we've spent together here this afternoon, you're doing a damn good job at your job. So keep up the great work in each of your respective districts. Dr. Brim, I know that we had some question cards floating around in the audience. I'm not sure if anyone had any questions because we covered a great deal of information today, and I want to thank you all for being so honest and being so candid and coming up here and talking about some of the great things that you're doing. In fact, to show you how much I'd like to thank you, I'd like to call up Dr. Eddie Renier, who is the chair of the Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys at this time, so that we can give you some tokens of appreciation that we have for you. Yes, ma'am?
I think we would be remiss. Lori White, Superintendent of Sarasota County, will be retiring in February 2017, and she has done an amazing job of what is happening in Sarasota County, so I just
Let's give
wanted to make
Superintendent
sure
White a hand for being in a position that probably most of us wishes we were in as well. So
she has the biggest smile on her face.
absolutely, absolutely. Well, we wish you all the best in your future endeavors, ma'am, and we thank you for your many years of service in Sarasota County. Thank you.
We wanted to have a way of marking for the heroes of our society. African American males are not a desirable group in our culture. We're looked down upon in every way possible. In fact, we even look badly upon ourselves because society thinks us so poorly. And so those heroes among us who work with us and who struggle with us on a daily basis, who meet us more than halfway, should be commended, and I don't think that you are. The council wants to do that, to commend you for the work that you do on the job, off the job, even sometimes when you're about to go to bed. So thank you, each of you, and we have a token to thank you. We are hoping one day we will raise money, we'll match these awards with cash. This is something I'm working on. But until that day, what we can do is thank you from the bottom of our hearts. And we have some awards. If we can pass them out. Jeff? Thank you. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Pleasure working with you.
Pleasure's been mine, truly.
Thank you so much.
I mean, every one of you.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thank you. Yes, you're welcome. Hope to see you again. I'm sorry you're leaving. I'll still be living in Sarasota. There you go. And we have one more, haven't we?
Yeah, go ahead.
And we have an award for the mayor. If you can come up. This award comes especially to me because the mayor's a politician. And you know, politicians shouldn't associate themselves with black people because they think if we are, somehow we don't vote. Somehow votes are not important. And some folks avoid us like the plague. This man does not. He runs his city for every citizen of his city, black, white, or whatever color. And I want to take this special moment to thank him for the work that he does to unite us all.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Florida Council on the Social Status of Black Men and Boys, my name is Paul Wilson, Education Subcommittee Chair, and I thank you for joining us this afternoon for our Day of Dialogue here in Pinellas County. Have a fantastic afternoon.